We're going to talk about creaming method today. So creaming method, most classic use of the creaming method is to make cookies. Chocolate chip cookies are one of my favorite types of cookies, so I figured why not kill two birds with one stone here. You know, I can show you folks the creaming method and then I can have a batch of cookies to take over to a friend's house. So what we're going to do here is I've got all my ingredients out here. I've got room temperature butter, room temperature eggs. That's very important with the creaming method. People don't let those things get to room temperature, or in a place like Arizona, what happens is it gets so warm, the butter almost gets all greasy and nasty, and it's almost too cold. So you really got to watch it. If you put it out too early, you can always put it back in the walk-in to chill it down a few degrees. You don't want it to look all sweaty. So room temperature butter, room temperature eggs. I've got white sugar, brown sugar, a little bit, pinch of salt. I've got my pastry flour with a little bit of baking soda in there, vanilla, and my chocolate chips. So before I get anything in the work bowl here, just so I don't forget, I'm going to take my pastry flour, all-purpose flour, and my baking soda, and I'm going to go ahead and give these a little sift just to help aerate it. So get those here in the bowl, give it one of these, try not to wear it, no big deal. I could have done this before, but figure you might as well show this online. The big thing with the creaming method that we're trying to do is control the number and size of air cells that we have in our product, because that's what gives us a lot of our leavening in our product. We get some of the leavening from the baking soda, but some of it just from the fact that we're going to cream the ingredients together. Alrighty, so we've got this is all sifted, ready to go. We can set it aside for now. Nice and light and fluffy. All right, so to start with the creaming method, we're going to have our butter, and we're going to put this in the work bowl, paddle attachment, and we're going to just let the butter get worked a little bit, get it fluffed up a little bit, and then we're going to add both of our sugars and our salt. What's going to happen is those crystals of the sugar are going to actually cut into the butter and start forming these little air pockets, these little air cells. That's the key reason why we have to be very careful with our butter temperature. We don't want it ice cold because it won't incorporate well. And if it's too warm, it'll actually slick out and you're going to not be able to form those air cells. The crystals of the sugar is just going to cut right through and it's going to be a greasy mess. Open up our work bowl. I've got a nice big scraper here because we're going to need to scrape our bowl down often. Make sure we get all our butter in. There we go. Go ahead and lower the head. And I'm just going to let this go just to start fluffing it up for a second. So literally we're just getting it to fluff up just for a second, just to smooth it out. Pull it off the bottom here. Again, the problem with Arizona, it's very warm here, especially in the lights in the studio here, so my butter is actually a little softer than I would ideally like it, but it's going to be fine. Again, our brown sugar, white sugar, salt. I made sure my brown sugar was nice and moist, that it wasn't very hard and chunky. Remember, what you can do is you can get those little ceramic discs that you soak in water, and you can put that in with your brown sugar to help rehydrate it, rehydrate the molasses a little bit, because if it's hard and crunchy, it's not going to smooth out well, it's not going to cream well here. We're going to go about 5 to 10 minutes on the mixer here. We're going to have to watch it. We're kind of looking for a certain texture as the fat lightens up is really what we're looking for, is a color change. That's when the air is getting in there and you're going to see the butter start to lighten up and lighten up. course, I just stopped it for a second here because I want to make sure I scrape this down often. If you don't scrape the bowl, what happens is you get this phenomenon called run out, where you have all this fat on the bottom. See all this sugar on the bottom and butter? It hasn't incorporated. That's going to form an unbalanced cookie where you're going to have a lot of fat that's just going to actually bleed out of the cookie. So several times here I'm going to go through and I'm going to scrape the bottom of the bowl, and I'm going to scrape the paddle as well because there's butter and sugar stuck on here. Common mistake made by students is they don't do this scraping. They think, oh, I don't need to worry about that. And they wonder why their cookies aren't ideal. My butter was pretty soft, so this is actually not taking very much time at all. So we really got to watch this. Different formulas may ask you to go longer or shorter on your creaming because they're looking for a certain texture or a certain size of the air cells. So again, making sure I get all the fat off the bottom. We want it all incorporated well. Just going to turn my beater, my paddle attachment here. Go ahead and pull it off because I've got sugar stuck on the top of my paddle that hasn't incorporated fully with everything else. So I got to make sure that I get all this out. The next thing we add in the creaming method are our room temperature eggs and our vanilla if present in the formula. So I've got this case, for this formula, it was almost exactly 2 eggs. So I'm going to go ahead, I'm going to add 1, and then I'm going to go ahead and let this mix for a second just to get that egg worked in, and then I'm going to add the second one. That first egg's about worked in, so I've got my second egg here. It wasn't literally 2 eggs, but by weight, by grams, that was how my formula worked out. And I got my vanilla. Gonna let this work together, and then I'm again scrape the bowl. When you're using room temperature ingredients, it does not take long at all for this all to come together. But it's still gonna be a little lumpy if I don't get in here and scrape the bottom. A lot of people try to just scrape the sides. They don't go on that very bottom and get that little, nook on the bottom, and they have a lot of dry ingredients stuck on there. Undissolved sugar or butter stuck on the bottom. And again, we can have this phenomenon called run out. This is stirred well, and now I'm going to add my flour. Now, again, this is another case where different formulas may tell you different things. In some cases, you may add your flour in stages. You may do a half at a time or a third and a third. In this particular chocolate chip formula that I'm using, that we actually use in the culinary program, it says to go ahead and add this all at once. I'm going to bring it together, but I'm not going to bring it together so it's so worked up that it's ready for the chocolate chips. I'm actually going to go about 75% mixed. Why am I doing that? Cookies can develop too much gluten. Remember, if we have moisture, we have flour, we have mixing action, that's what forms gluten. Gluten is something we want to control tightly because we don't want just a cookie that's got so much tooth feel to it that it's hard to bite through. So we're just going to barely bring this together. Again, maybe 75%, still see some specks of flour, and then I'm going to actually hand mix in my chocolate chips. I will stop and scrape the bowl at least one more time. I'm going to tell you right now, I'm going to go slow on this, like you've seen on Food Network, because I know you all watch Food Network. If I crank this up to 2-3 on my mixer, the flour is just going to go out in the air and I'm going to be wearing it. come together pretty fast. It's not quite to 75%, but like I said, I want to make sure I scrape the bottom one more time. So I stopped it. I scrape the sides because I have a lot of dry flour that's kicked up. I'm going to take this whole thing and I'm actually going to turn it over. If you can see in there, with all the dried flour I just scraped up from the bottom. If I don't have that mixed into the cookie properly, you know, the first cookie that I scoop out is going to be different from the last cookie I scoop out. Consistency is always the key in the culinary shop. Scrape off my paddle again. Again, I have dry flour on my paddle. If it's dry on here, it's not going to be incorporated properly into the formula. Better to take a little extra time and get everything scraped down than wonder why your cookies aren't turning out. I'm going to give this just a quick stir and then I'm going to pull it off. Alright, I'm going to go ahead and pull the paddle off, pull the work bowl off, and bring it over here for ease of use. Alright, I need to scrape all my good dough off here. I didn't let this go for 5 minutes once I put the flour in. It went maybe at most a couple of minutes. Is that a guideline, a rule you can follow? Unfortunately, no. Like most baking, most pastry products, a lot depends on how warm is the kitchen, how warm is the bake shop, how warm or cold was your butter. You just really got to develop a feel for this. We will just set this aside. You can always, you know, I can be bad and lick that later. Chocolate chips are called inclusions. It could be nuts, chocolate chips, white chocolate, peanut butter chips, if you insist. I could have put this in and gave it a quick stir with the paddle. My issue is with doing that is you can break the inclusions. You can actually chop those down too fine. And you also run the risk of overworking your batter, your dough, and developing too much gluten. Got some nice semi-sweet chocolate chips here, and I'm just barely going to combine this. I'm barely going to bring this together. Again, always making sure I pull from the bottom to make sure it's all mixed. Try to get it even. Now, that's about as far as I'm going to go. So what I've got there looks pretty good. Now, a lot of formulas and a lot of the preferred ways that I do cookies is I'm going to chill this. You could form this into a log. You could slice it. That'd be especially good if I was doing something like sugar cookies, where I want them nice and even, very uniform thickness. Here, I'm just going to go ahead. I'm going to transfer this into a small bowl. I'm going to put it in the fridge, let it chill down, and then bake them off. So at its most basic, what we have here is the creaming method. You could use this for a variety of quick breads, you know, things like that. It's an important basic technique to get correct. Again, room temperature butter, room temperature eggs. I did not overwork the dough once I put my flour in because I don't want to develop too much gluten. That's the issue with a lot of products, especially like scones and pie crust. A little bit different technique, but if you overwork it, you develop too much gluten. You wonder why it doesn't taste as good as you maybe have had other places. Scraper, bench scraper, spatula. I probably went through and in the small batch of chocolate chip cookies, I scraped it down 5 or 6 times. I'm really aware that I don't want to have any residual butter, fat, or any of the flour stuck in the bottom that's going to give me an inconsistent cookie. So, you know, again, pretty basic technique, but it's something that we want to make sure that we get correct. So, fortunately, what I'm going to do is, I also made ice cream, so I'm going to bake these off after they've chilled well. I'm going to make some ice cream sandwiches. Perfect treat for Phoenix in the summer. We'll see you next time on another culinary video. This is Chef Will. We'll see you later.